Clinton spent an awful lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein, bombed around the world on his private plane, but then told us he had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was a sexual predator. Just had no idea. Well, that wasn't very plausible, but now a new report indicates their relationship was even closer than anyone knew before. Chief breaking news correspondent Trace Gallagher has all the details for us tonight. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker. Jeffrey Epstein's 10,000-acre New Mexico ranch has been compared to the HBO series Westworld because it has an elaborate cowboy-themed village. It's also been dubbed baby-making ranch because the New York Times reported that Epstein once said he wanted to simultaneously impregnate 20 girls at the ranch to improve the human race. Former President Bill Clinton has said repeatedly the only Epstein property he ever stayed in was his New York City townhome. But a security expert brought in to set up surveillance systems at the ranch tells the Daily Mail that Bill Clinton frequently visited there and that Hillary and Chelsea Clinton also visited on a number of occasions. But the security guy says the former first family stayed at a guest house in the cowboy village, not the main house. The security expert also reportedly says the former president was Epstein's closest, quote, celebrity mate. And Virginia Roberts, the woman who claims Prince Andrew had sex with her multiple times while she was 17, also says she saw Bill Clinton on Jeffrey Epstein's private island for a dinner held in Clinton's honor. Clinton and his spokesperson denied that, though Bill Clinton says he only flew on Epstein's private plane 4 times, even though flight logs show that he took 26 flights on the so-called Lolita Express. Bill Clinton's office maintains he did not know anything about Epstein's crimes. The security expert, by the way, also said that on some parts of the ranch, surveillance cameras were not allowed.
Thanks, Trace.
Bill Clinton. Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
On some parts of the ranch, surveillance cameras are not allowed. Tammy Bruce hosts Get Tammy Bruce on Fox Station, which is reason enough to subscribe. And she joins us tonight. Tammy, on some parts of the Epstein ranch, surveillance cameras were not allowed.
I bet.
What do you make of all this? It's so creepy. I can barely stand it.
Yeah, I mean, we're both laughing because it's that creepy. This is
Yes,
the creepy,
exactly.
dark laugh that it's
Yes.
inexplicable. But here's what is fascinating to me, and understandably, you know, the focus has been on Bill Clinton and the flights that he's taking. This story clearly places Hillary Clinton in that same realm. But it's not just that dynamic. Here now we've got Hillary Clinton with a link to Jeffrey Epstein. We clearly know of a strong link with her and Harvey Weinstein. Ronan Farrow just this week came out with an admission that not only, of course, we know through his book that she tried to have an associate push him off of the Weinstein story, but now he's saying that their relationship changed after he investigated Weinstein. So this is not a woman who's caught up in some kind of a circle and is shocked by what's going on. She tried to punish Ronan Farrow for doing his investigation, and now, while she's never talked about Epstein, she's been there as well, to say nothing of her husband's history. So all 3 men clearly credibly accused of rape, for the other 2 also sex trafficking. How does that work? That Hillary Clinton is in the link with all of those men, while Ghislaine Maxwell, the associate of Epstein, is effectively a fugitive. Her life is over. Prince Andrew's life is over and ruined. His daughter's lives, they probably won't be royals and they won't have the same future they expected. But Hillary Clinton is still being encouraged to run for president. I'm getting ready to do something too. I'm running for president. And she's the only one with links to all 3 of those men.
So if she runs, do you think it'd be fair to ask her, this ranch apparently had an 8-person, quote, party shower. I would ask, if I were covering the campaign, like, what do you know about that? Did you ever see the 8-person party shower? What do you suppose went on there? What were you doing there?
I mean, these are very basic questions. Like, what is she, is it a coincidence that these are the men in her life? You know,
it's a great point.
What is it about these men that she thought was fine, but then we find out that 2 of them at least were perhaps 2 of the most prolific abusers of women and rapists in the last half a century.
Can I just ask, I know you're not a mathematician, I want to put you on the spot, but what do you think the odds of that are?
I think I would probably in one day be struck by lightning and win the lottery. Those odds are higher than these choices. Who you associate with is a choice. And she's made remarkable choices.
Yes.
And interestingly, these two men also relied on a unique kind of protection that we still don't understand perfectly about how did they get away with what they did for so long.
Well, it's a good question.
And they've got a common thread, and that common thread is named Hillary. And yet we keep focusing on Bill. I would say that these kinds of questions, this is just the surface, I'm sure. We need to ask those questions, and she should be asked them, and she should answer them, because we don't
even know where the money came from. How did Jeffrey Epstein get so rich? How did he afford an 8-person party shower in New Mexico and Molestation Island in a plane? So I thought we had a press corps in this country. Like, if you can't answer that question, I know it has nothing to do with Ukraine, but
if we're willing to ruin lives, if we're willing to ruin various lives of people who are associated with him, why is a woman who seems now to be associated with him not facing the same scrutiny as other, and yet she is in even a more complicated web than Maxwell or Prince Andrew? We just want some fairness across the board.
Amen. The great Tammy Bruce. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion.
The United States, as every fourth grader learns, is a meritocracy. What does that mean? Well, it means that our leaders do not inherit their position, as they do in, say, Brunei or Saudi Arabia. Our leaders are selected on the basis of merit. Their talents and abilities are identified, usually in school, and then up they go from there. That's why only the smartest kids, we're told, get into Yale. Undeniably incandescent minds like Cory Booker and Chris Cuomo and the kids of other Democratic office holders. Nerds, they call themselves with false modesty. The ordinary among us, meanwhile, go to Rutgers. In this country, the hard truth is, and get used to it, pal, is that the most impressive naturally rise to the top. That's what they tell us. Do you still believe that? Or are you starting to suspect that the whole meritocracy speech might just be an elaborate justification for keeping mediocre people in charge? Before you make up your mind on that question, consider Russia. It's not the nation of Russia. That hasn't changed in a while. Russia is still a cold and vodka-soaked and only marginally relevant place, at least from the perspective of the United States. No, consider instead how a ruling class views Russia. To them, Russia is the single most important country in the world. Nothing else comes close. Just yesterday on Meet the Press over on NBC, Chuck Todd, by the way, is a poster child for the modern meritocracy, and therefore, by definition, a genius, unlike you, stopped a sitting U.S. senator in his tracks and all but accused him of spying for Russia. Watch this exchange.
In December of 2018, a Ukrainian court ruled that Ukrainian officials had violated Ukrainian law by meddling in our election, and that was reported in the New York Times.
According to the New York Times a couple weeks ago, U.S. senators were briefed after Fiona Hill's testimony that actually this entire effort to frame Ukraine for the Russian meddling of 2016, of which you just made this case that they've done it, that actually this is an effort of Russia propaganda, that this is a Russian intelligence propaganda campaign in order to get people like you to say these things about Ukraine. Are you at all concerned you're doing Russian intelligence work here?
Are you at all concerned that you're doing Russian intelligence work? Well, gee, Chuck, now that you put it that way. It's pretty funny. But what's funnier, what's weirder, certainly, is that we're still talking about Russia at all. We now know it's not really a story. It never happened. There was no collusion. Russia didn't hack our democracy. The whole thing was a talking point, a ludicrous talking point invented by the Hillary Clinton campaign on or about November 9th, 2016 to explain their unexpected defeat in the last presidential election. We lost, and we shouldn't have lost. From the start, that has been the only argument that underpins the Russia conspiracy theory. And now, thanks to a multi-million-dollar investigation that extended over a period of years that the rest of us had to endure to the exclusion of everything else, that conspiracy theory has died. It was killed, in fact, by Robert Mueller. And yet somehow, It lives on in the sneering accusations of our mindless public intellectuals and hair hats in the television anchor seat. You'd think that people like that would be contrite, maybe a little humbled after the Mueller report came out and proved 2 years of hyperventilation wrong. But no, they're more obsessed with Russia than they have ever been. Watch poor mouth-breathing Chuck Todd go full Joe McCarthy yesterday.
The fact that Russia was so aggressive does not exclude the fact that President Poroshenko actively worked for Secretary Clinton. Now, if I'm wrong, and if all these
worked for Secretary, I mean, my goodness, wait a minute, Senator Kennedy, you now have the president of Ukraine saying he actively worked for the Democratic nominee for president. I mean, now come on. I mean, I got to put up. You realize the only other person selling this argument outside the United States is this man, Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin! Are you now, or have you ever been a pawn of Vladimir Putin? You'd think they'd have more self-awareness than to say things like that out loud, given American history, but of course they never do. Not only are these people unwise and hysterical, totally political, utterly dishonest, they're also kind of dumb.
These people are sick.
Because shifting mental gears is hard for dumb people. It turns out the entire on-air staff over at MSNBC is still pretending that Russia collusion is the most important story there is. It's like Robert Mueller never delivered his report.
Is it possible that Donald Trump now takes his beliefs in the world from the president of Russia?
He's acting as a Russian asset. I mean, he's amplifying talking points put together by the Kremlin.
I can't come up with a plausible explanation for all of these elected officials seeming to want to just turn our government over to Vladimir Putin.
This time the enemy is Russia, which seems to have consumed one of America's great political parties whole.
The Constitution is a piece of paper that they would rather rip up or cut into segments rather than defend this country at all costs. The Russians set this whole thing up.
We've left the good guys and have joined the bad guys in the world, and Republicans writ large seem to be okay with it.
Now we are left with, as I've said before, a transnational crime syndicate masked as a government led by a Kremlin asset.
Donald Trump believes it in his heart. The words of a communist, ex-communist dictator, KGB officer, rather than any person in America. We are in danger.
We are in danger, says Malcolm Nance. This is really irresponsible. Keep in mind that everything we just played you aired in the past 2 weeks. If you excluded debunked conspiracy theories, could any of these people actually tell you why Vladimir Putin is so bad? Why is he so bad? He's bad, Chuck Todd says. Okay, speak slowly so I can understand. What makes Vladimir Putin worse than, I don't know, a whole long list of American allies? Let's try the King of Saudi Arabia, for example, or the people who run the Emirates, the people on whose payroll so many in Washington are right now. Why is he worse than them? They couldn't answer that.
We choose truth over facts.
For Chuck Todd and the rest of the dummies, Vladimir Putin isn't a real person with actual ideas and priorities and a country and beliefs. No, he stopped being that long ago. He's a metaphor, a living metaphor. He's the boogeyman. Step out of line and you're a traitor in league with Vladimir Putin. Let's put his picture on the screen. Can we get his picture on the screen? Yeah, please. The irony, of course, is that Putin, for all his faults, does not hate America as much as many of these people do. They really dislike our country, and they call other people traitors because they're mouthing the talking points of Putin. These are people who don't know anything about Russia, who don't speak Russian, who couldn't identify 3 cities in Russia. The rest of the world isn't quite that dumb. Dumb as it may be, not quite that dumb. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, for example, in the past month, Macron has called NATO, quote, brain dead because NATO exists to provide the common defense, and yet it has, with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, no clear enemy. Europe and the United States, Macron has said, should have closer relationships with Russia, not more hostile ones. So does that make Macron a stooge of Putin? Is he a puppet of Moscow? Or could he just be a rational leader, the kind that we don't have, looking out for his country's interests? Russia is not America's main enemy, obviously. No sane person thinks it is. Our main enemy, of course, is China. And the United States ought to be in a relationship with Russia aligned against China to the extent that we can. China is the country that's currently, right now, murdering tens of thousands of Americans every year with fentanyl. It's depopulating parts of the country. It's pushing our life expectancy down. That's how profound a threat this is. It's coming from China, and our elites barely care. They won't even acknowledge it. In fact, many of our politicians run interference for the communist government of China instead. In California, politicians boycott other U.S. states for their moral transgressions and then fly to China to praise this dictatorship. Michael Bloomberg doesn't even do that. He denies that China is a dictatorship at all. Watch this.
China is doing a lot. Yes, they're still building a bunch of coal-fired power plants.
And they're still burning coal.
Yes, they are. But they are now moving plants away from the cities. The Communist Party wants to stay in power in China, and they listen to the public. When the public says, I can't breathe the air, Xi Jinping is not a dictator. He has to satisfy his constituents, or he's not going to survive.
He's not a dictator?
No, he has a constituency to answer to.
Speaking of stooges, Xi Jinping is not a dictator. No, he can be voted out. Oh, sorry, there are no elections. The dictator's not a dictator. That's prima facie disqualifying. And yet no one's even noticed. Bloomberg's comments have gotten not 1% of the reaction that anything Russia-related gets. The press isn't racing to call Bloomberg a traitor. So that tape makes you wonder. Why? Because most of Washington is already in the tank for China. During the days of the Chinese emperors, the imperial government was supported by thousands of eunuchs. The emperors are gone, but the eunuch clearly remains, in case you haven't noticed. Kind of an amazing moment on Sunday over on NBC on one of the Sunday shows that people used to pay attention to but no longer do. U.S. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana was on there with Chuck Todd, who was the host, and he made an argument that Todd didn't like. Todd didn't rebut the argument, not capable of that. So instead, he did what so many do now. He accused Senator Kennedy of being an agent of Russia.
Senator Kennedy, you now have the president of Ukraine saying he actively worked for the Democratic nominee for president. I mean, now come on. I mean, I got to put up, you realize the only other person selling this argument outside the United States is this man, Vladimir Putin.
So in a normal time, we'd all recognize that for what it was, an embarrassing and low moment. Accusing people without evidence, under the cover of journalism, of acting on behalf of a foreign government. There's a name for that, actually. It's called McCarthyism. We went through a period where that happened. We learned nothing, apparently, or the left didn't. That's literally what it is, McCarthyism. But after calling people racist, it's the press's new favorite baseless allegation to throw around. More evidence of that yesterday on MSNBC. One of their anchors and one of her guests agreed that Senator Kennedy must be working for Moscow. Just must be. Watch this.
In defiance of facts, intelligence assessments, reason, Senator John Kennedy was out peddling Vladimir Putin's talking points.
I mean, look, this is a guy who has a degree from Oxford. He's not an unintelligent man, yet he comes off as an addled Russian asset on television.
I don't understand the proactive work on behalf of Vladimir Putin's Kremlin.
No, I don't understand it either.
Yeah, he must be disloyal. Aaron Mate is a journalist with The Gray Zone and The Nation, and he joins us tonight. Aaron, thanks so much for coming on. So what do you make of, I mean, this seems to have escalated over the past 3 years to the point where formerly mainstream journalists are just looking right into the camera and saying, yeah, I don't agree with him, he must be a traitor to the country. What do you make of that?
What is so funny about the indignation about Senator Kennedy's comments is that he was pointing out a documented fact. There was Ukrainian meddling in 2016, and it's no secret. Ukrainian officials, they leaked information that exposed some apparent corruption by Paul Manafort, and it was consequential. It led to Paul Manafort's resignation from the Trump campaign. And the stated intent of Ukrainian officials was to weaken the Trump campaign because they wanted to help elect Hillary Clinton. And, you know, it's strange to see pundits pretending as if that didn't happen. And what they're trying to do is conflate that with a different theory about Ukrainian meddling, which is not proven. It's true. And that is the one that Trump tried to put forward in his phone call with Zelensky, where he appears to be saying that it wasn't Russia that was behind the hacking of the DNC, and then it might have been Ukraine. It's true there's no evidence for that theory, and though it's fair enough to point out that. But what's also ironic here is that the people who are indignant about that claim by Trump are accepting the claim that Russia hacked the DNC, even though there's been no evidence yet. There have been claims by intelligence officials, but those same intelligence officials gave us the whole scam that was the Trump-Russia collusion.
May I stop you there, since I do think you're one of the more credible voices on this, and I should state I don't even think we agree on politics, but you've really followed this carefully. At this moment, December 3rd, 2019, we still don't have actual evidence that the Russian government hacked the DNC?
We've had claims from a intelligence process that was managed by John Brennan, who has a very sketchy history, including being caught lying to the Senate when the Senate was investigating the CIA torture program. And we have an indictment from Robert Mueller, but that indictment, as I've written about at Real Clear Investigations, has serious holes. So, you know, Trump raises this theory in this phone call with Zelensky that it might have been Ukraine. What I think Trump should do, and what I think all journalists should be calling for, is let the public see for ourselves what the underlying evidence is. Well, exactly. We've been told by discredited intelligence officials that it was Russia. That intelligence should be released so everybody can judge for themselves.
Shut up and stop asking questions, says the reporter. These people are sick. I don't think you understand the rules, Monte. If you don't take at face value the claims of American intel officials, present or retired, then you're working for Russia.
Well, you know, yeah, and the irony here, Tucker, you know, on the
we're almost
point,
out of time, so sum it up for me.
Well, just on this point right now, there is a huge scandal that you've highlighted on your show, which everyone else is ignoring, where intelligence officials told us that Syria carried out a chemical weapons attack. Now we have whistleblowers at the OPCW raising a question about that.
Exactly.
Yet nobody on either side is talking about that.
And you know what? Shame on me for not doing that story every night. And thank you for reminding me, because you're absolutely right. That is a scandal, an actual one. Monte, thank you so much.
Thanks for
We're about to see some very real progress, because after months of delays, yes, the report on FISA abuse by the Inspector General will be released on Monday. Look at this article from the Washington Post. Those delays might have been the result of a fundamental disagreement between the Attorney General Barr, the Inspector General Horowitz about corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and the DOJ. But President Trump is now refuting that, as did the Attorney General. Take a look.
I have not seen the report. Perhaps he's read the report. I think he was quoted incorrectly. I do believe that, because I'm hearing the report is very powerful, but I'm hearing that by reading lots of different things, not from inside information, but from outside information. I think all we have to do is wait. Is it going to be released on Monday or so? I think we have to read it, and we have to see it. But I hear there's a lot of devastating things in that report, but we'll see what happens.
My sources are telling me that the president's right. I'm told that a set of clear, damning, established facts will be laid out in the FISA report. For example, we already know. We know that the FBI and DOJ officials will warn repeatedly not to trust Steele's dirty dossier. They were warned by Bruce Orr, Kathleen Kavlak, and others. So we know that Steele doesn't stand behind his dirty Russian dossier, because in an interrogatory under the threat of perjury in Great Britain, he testified under, I don't know if any of it's true, maybe 50-50. Really? That makes that whole dossier unverifiable. How could it be used in any capacity in any FISA warrant? We know the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid for the dossier. We know that Andrew McCabe said no dossier no FISA warrant without the dossier. We also know that the Inspector General, well, he's not a criminal prosecutor. That's not what he does. He doesn't have the power to convene a grand jury. Doesn't have the file to file criminal charges. His previous referrals surrounding Comey's lack of candor, McCabe's lying, they've gone nowhere at the DOJ. But let not your heart be troubled, because the Attorney General has now clearly stated federal prosecutor John Durham is now conducting what is a criminal investigation. He was tasked with the issue of the origins of the Russia hoax, not Horowitz. He was FISA abuse. He has the ability to, convene grand juries and panel them, and make charges, and there could be people arrested. And according to my sources, the abuse of power documented in this report next Monday will be relevant in every way to Durham's real investigation, with real teeth, real power to go out, convene grand juries, and charges be made.
people are sick.
That is now expanded in its size, in its scope, and in its meaning by now being declared criminal. It means the ball is squarely in the Attorney General's court. And according to Barr, a deep state insurgency is in fact undermining the rule of law in this country, and that spying did occur. Joining us now with more, North Carolina Congressman Mark Meadows, Fox News contributor John Solomon, with some breaking news tonight about what is in the report. I hear you've got your top 10 findings. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm working on that, and hopefully I have it done tomorrow. But let me tell you something. I think
I'll tell you tomorrow. How about tonight? Give us a preview tonight.
Yeah, all right, I'll give you some tonight. I should do some of that tonight. Listen, there's going to be 6 to 12 factual issues, concerns, mistakes, errors, abuses that the IG is going to identify. And they're going to range from the very serious, the intentional falsification of documents around the FISA abuse, to the withholding of exculpatory statements that people like George Papadopoulos and possibly Carter Page made that weren't disclosed to the FISA court. And here's what I'm going to give you. We know a lot about the political concerns about Christopher Steele's background. I'll make a bold prediction tonight. I think the report is going to reveal that back in 2015, the FBI was warned by Great Britain that there were concerns about Christopher Steele's reliability, specifically his use of subsources. And remember, why is that important? The FBI claimed in that footnote they had no derogatory information about Christopher Steele. I think that's going to be a big highlight in the report.
These people are sick.
Then I want to go to Mark. We now know, it's irrefutable, premeditated fraud, meaning they were warned on a FISA court because Christopher Steele, his own admission in an interrogatory, said, I don't know if any of it's true, but if they used any of it, isn't that premeditated fraud on a court? And they were warned repeatedly about it.
I think for sure there's going to be one clear example of premeditated fraud. That's the falsification of documents. Whether Steele's...
Well, if they were warned that the Steele dossier can't be verified, that it was not verifiable.
That's right.
That Hillary paid for it, and Steele's not trustworthy, they never should have used any of that dossier. True or false?
It will, true that they shouldn't have used it. The question now will be, was it premeditated or was it FBI bungling? We need to wait and see what the IG comes down on that.
If Bruce Orr, Mark Meadows, and Kathleen Kavlak warned the DOJ and the FBI, you can't trust Steele, it's not verifiable, Clinton paid for it, and what else do you need? And then you use it anyway? Really?
Well, they shouldn't have been using it, Sean. I know your viewers and many of my constituents in Western North Carolina have been waiting for this report for a long, long time, and next week it'll come. But what we will see, based on documents that we've actually given the IG, is not only did they have the reason to know, but they knew that there were credibility problems with the very documents that they were spying on American citizens and using those documents inappropriately. And so I think we'll start to see that perhaps everything looked okay in July of 2016, but very quickly, September, October, before the election, they knew they had a problem. And then by January, it should have all been over. We wonder why the president is so upset about being falsely accused over and over again. It's the same Adam Schiff that said there was nothing wrong. Well, you're going to get to see next Monday, not only was Adam Schiff wrong, but he was intentionally misleading the American people.
We choose truth over facts.
Congressman, about what you believe, how you interpret Attorney General Barr's statements, because he gave a powerful speech that I don't believe any Attorney General would ever give if he didn't know a lot more.
Yeah, the Attorney General has taken this very serious from the very beginning, and John Durham is doing some great work. John Solomon made a good point. The Inspector General and his team, they've been very methodical, but they're really hamstrung by just a certain group and a certain amount of information that they can look at, and a certain group that they can really investigate and question. That being said, I can tell you that some of the things that the Attorney General has had access to goes well beyond the scope of just FISA abuse. It really gets to the heart and the core of what Jim Jordan and I have been saying for a long time. There was a problem within the FBI, the way that they were going after this president. It was inappropriate and certainly not expected by the vast majority of the great people that serve our country at the FBI and DOJ.
Thank goodness for the Freedom Caucus, and John Solomon, great work as well. Thank you both.
never seen in my lifetime or in modern political history any presidential candidate trying to discredit the elections and the election process before votes have even taken place. It's unprecedented. It happens to be based on no facts. Every expert, regardless of political party, regardless of ideology, conservative or liberal, who has ever examined these issues in a serious way will tell you that instances of significant voter fraud are not to be found, that, keep in mind, elections are run by state and local officials, which means that there are places like Florida, for example, where you've got a Republican governor who's a Republican appointees are going to be running and monitoring a whole bunch of these election sites. The notion that somehow if Mr. Trump loses Florida, it's because of those people that you have to watch out for, that is both irresponsible and, by the way, doesn't really show the kind of leadership and toughness that you'd want out of a president. You start whining before the game's even over. If whenever things are going badly for you and you lose, you start blaming somebody else, then you don't have what it takes to be in this job. But the larger point that I want to emphasize here is that there is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections, in part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past or that there are instances in which that will happen this time. And so I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes.
These people are sick.